trip. So I'd like to introduce here for you, we have Miss Naomi Levine, the Director of Admissions from Northfield Mount Hermon, and Mr. Miles Bailey, the Dean of Admissions from the Westminster School. Please give them a round of applause. I feel very distant. Dana's supposed to be here in between us here. Is my microphone really loud? Okay, I'm just standing in front of the speaker. Good. We'd like to give an opportunity for Miles and Naomi to introduce themselves and their schools to you.
Was it on?
It's a hot mic.
Oh, sorry. I failed. My name is Naomi Levine. I work at the Northfield Mount Hermon School, which is 22 minutes from here, north of here. We are a 9th through 12th grade plus postgraduate boarding school that has 630 students, and we are 84% boarding and 23% international from 61 countries. Thank you for having us.
Hi, my name is Miles Bailey. I'm the Dean of Admissions at the Westminster School in Simsbury, Connecticut, which is exactly 1 hour from here, south. We are 9 through postgraduate as well, about 425 students co-ed, and about 80% boarding as well. Thank you, guys.
So very quickly, our goal this evening is to provide some perspective, I think some reassurance, and some wisdom to Eaglebrook's rising class of 2026 about the 14-month journey that is ahead of all of us. For context, I'd like to share just a rapid review of the general timeline we have in working with our students and their families. Our secondary school advising office meets with all of you this weekend and then with 8th graders and their advisors during March and April, with our goal of learning deeply about each child, their talents, passions, aspirations, their needs, and then we begin to build exploratory school lists, large lists, 25 to 30 plus schools for students to begin to research in preparation for our May school fairs, when we will bring over 100 secondary schools to campus. After the fairs, we'll work with students again to shrink those school lists down to about 20. We assign families, get ready, summer homework, research, outreach, reflection, maybe visit a few schools. Then in mid-August, families must deliver back to our office a list of 8 to 12 schools that they plan to tour and interview during the wonderful week of the JBS invasion. I say that for the benefit of our directors of admission. They know when that week is because they are flooded, and we thank you for your hospitality. The week after Country Fair, you'll be making these visits, and during the fall, we will host an additional 50 secondary school admission officers for small group meetings with students who have specifically identified those as schools of interest. By November, the student's school list shrinks to 6 to 9 schools, to which that student plans to deliver an application. Sounds pretty simple, yes? If only it were. We'd like to ask you, our panelists, to provide more insight into how to embark on this journey thoughtfully and perhaps ease some of our collective anxieties. So, before we get caught up in getting into the next school, perhaps we can focus first on our students' current school. Each of you, Dana too, when she gets here, I promise, has seen hundreds of applications from Eaglebrook students. You know Eaglebrook so well. What are your experiences with the value and impact of an Eaglebrook graduate on your community? How should these fifth formers work to develop themselves to become impactful citizens at your schools?
Great question. I'll try to take half of that, maybe. I think first and foremost, like Mr. Fay said, we all know Eaglebrook really well, right? And so we know what we're getting. We know what the level of rigor here is academically. We know how well prepared the students are going to be. So for students in particular, I would recommend that you just kind of continue to dive in over the next 12 to 14 months, right? I think you don't need to feel like you need to just expand everything you're doing and add 5, 6, 7 new activities, right? Just continue to do what you're doing and to kind of to care about that, to dive into that. If you are that student who just loves to constantly try new things, that's okay too. I think what we know that we are getting from Eaglebrook is we know we're getting students with a really good academic foundation. We know we're getting students who care about the idea of kind of balance and contributing across the programs. And we know we're getting good self-advocates.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Dana Anselmi, thank you very much. Welcome, welcome. I think we'll just make sure you're on there. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
No, that's no problem. We're going to take that opportunity, if you don't mind, Naomi. Dana, would you like to introduce yourself and briefly summarize St. Paul's in a sentence or two?
I would love to, and apologies for my delay. We had a little bit of road issues, but we're here and we're excited. My name is Dana Anselmi. I'm the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at St. Paul's School. We're in Concord, New Hampshire, just about a little under 2 hours on a normal day from here. We are a student body of 540 students from all over the world, as all of our schools are, and we are 100% boarding. Another fun fact about St. Paul's that I love to share is that we sit on a 2,000-acre campus with 25 miles of trails and 25 bridges over our beautiful ponds.
Catch your breath for some water there.
Thank you.
Naomi, yeah, go ahead. The Eaglebrook student, you know them well. How do they contribute?
I do. I actually had two of them who came to Northfield Mount Hermon for 4 years. But I think a lot of what Miles says is 100% on. The only thing that I would add is something that you know by being at Eaglebrook that others might be learning when they get there is how to learn and live away from home. And to understand the concept that everything you do in boarding school is part of your education. So even when you've had fun here, you are having fun with people from all over the world. You have learned about different cultures. You are willing to push yourself outside your comfort zone, especially when you take all the extracurriculars you can, or what you call the co-curriculars every year. So I think that is something we find very appealing. But the fact that you understand what it means to live and learn and thrive, even as a day student or a boarder at a high school boarding school, is appealing to all of us.
So, Dana, I'm going to rephrase kind of the part of this question here. You've seen Eaglebrook students and the different schools that you've been a part of. What suggestions do you have to these young folks to continue their development here at Eaglebrook to best prepare them to become a member of your school?
Absolutely. I think that the way that the school is set up to encourage participation and involvement is huge. We at our schools are looking for people, everyone to have different passions that come in, and we create this incredible dynamic tapestry of humans who are doing really good things together. And so when you're at Eaglebrook, I think having an opportunity to lean into being a leader next year is huge. And by that I don't necessarily mean you have to have the big title, but really doing the right thing all around campus. The teacher recommendations that resonate with us are when we hear about kids holding the doors for others, helping them up, supporting a friend who may have crutches in the dining hall. Those kinds of things mean a lot to us, and that's being a leader. There are certainly opportunities to do that formally here as well, but I just want to encourage the students in the room to really think about how can I be the kind of citizen that we are going to want in our communities. And that's the stuff that Mr. Fay and your teachers are really good at representing to us on a day-to-day basis, not just when the spotlight's on you, but how are you being a good human to one another. On the academic side, work really hard, push yourselves. If you're not sure if you want to take that challenging class, you have the support here to do it. And if your teachers believe that's the right thing for you, follow that path. We want to see you pushing yourself. And those are the types of things that set you up for success when you get to our schools.
Thank you. Each of your schools starts in 9th grade. Eaglebrook goes through 9th grade. Sometimes this causes concern for a family wondering whether they should be applying to 9th or 10th grade. What do you say to a family if they may be considering reclassifying or entering as a 10th grader?
First of all, I think the idea of 9th or 10th, depending on what you're looking for, is a family decision. And I just was explaining this to Mr. Fay, that I am a firm believer that if you want to come in as a 9th grader, it's a gift. The same gift it is to come in as a 10th grader. You have to remember that every school, and they will be clear with you, will not just bring 9th graders in, they'll bring 10th graders, as well as some schools bring 11th graders. It is about what do you see yourself getting out of that 3 or 4 year experience? Is it there a really good reason as to why you want to do it? Because you are going to be, as a 9th grader, there for 4 years. Again, I have seen students, and I've seen them finding it to be the greatest gift they've had. And I've seen others who are ready to leave here and really embark on the 10th grade because they have gotten enough out of this experience. You have to remember that all of our schools are large enough that everyone doesn't know who's going to be a leader in all areas in 9th grade. And even if you join us after 9th grade, you still could be the captain of a team or the editor of the newspaper, take those very selective classes that you want to take. Because if we are taking you as a 10th grader, it means we believe you would thrive as a 10th grader. But I recommend as you talk to schools, some schools may have more firm opinions on it. But for example, at NMH, we have about 30% of our student body at some point that does reclassify. So the bulk of our student body goes to the grade that they're leaving in the next year.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add kind of from a numerical perspective, I think it's one of those questions for families as you go through this process that every school you're looking at should be able to answer, right? Every school should know itself well enough to say, we have X number of spaces available in 10th grade, and what are those ratios like? I think for a lot of us, while there's fewer spaces, there's going to be fewer applications as well. So I think in general, the ratios of kind of applicants to spaces tends to run pretty similar from 9th to 10th grade.
So just a note, we will have audience question time at the end of our presentation. So if you've got something, write it down, take a note, please, and text your neighbor so you don't forget it. We're going to move on here and talk a little bit about the school search. What are your suggestions for these very first months on how you would suggest these folks start their building their prospective school list?
Well, I think being here right now is a great first step. Some of you may have already been on some websites, even looked around some campuses as you've had games on some of these schools, against some of these schools. I think that you really want to focus on being present at Eaglebrook right now and building your incredible sort of skill set and continuing to lean into all those things. That said, there are some great opportunities in the spring, whether it's virtual or in-person open houses, designed to help students who are going to be going through the process in the next cycle. So go on websites. We just put we're about to put up our spring open house on our website today. So there's opportunities to think about these things early. The summer is another time that you can visit. The only caveat I would say is I wouldn't recommend that being the only time you visit a school. Every school has a personality, and that personality comes out when the kids are there. Otherwise, it's a bunch of beautiful buildings, and we love that, and it's good to see. But the real vibe of the community is important to get a feel for. You have wonderful resources here as well to help you sort of sculpt that and guide that, and I think that the websites themselves, we've gotten a lot better in the pandemic. We had to pull out all kinds of video content, so that's not something that has stopped, and same with our online offerings in terms of open houses and things. So please know that these are here for you. We are not tracking who's clicking on these things. We are not sort of expecting you to engage fully in this process yet, but there are resources there if you would like them.
I think the only thing I would add is right now the search you can do is something that could be a conversation. And the reason I say that is as you came to Eaglebrook, there were things that each and every one of you were looking for that Eaglebrook had for you. The same holds true for your next step. And it's really important to sit and put a list of what is important to you. What is important in your next school? It could be I don't want to be 3 hours away from home, or I only want to go to a school that has where I could be a day student. And then also think, which is probably the most important, what are your non-negotiables? What are those things that you have to have because you value them so much that your next school needs to have? And I say this because there are over 300 of us. So there's no reason anyone needs to give up a non-negotiable. So if you start by doing some of those things, it allows you to think about size and where in the country and all those important things for you and your family, and then you move on and do all the next steps.
Yeah, I think more of the same on that. I think you're at a point where you can kind of just identify those non-negotiables, and the ones that really kind of stand out to me are size, location, co-ed versus single gender, and specific programs, right? And so you start thinking like, I think size is a big deal in this, and I think there's in 50 or 100 different student size at a school, I think it's a really different feel. And so starting to think of maybe what that is, like what's your sweet spot there. For a lot of our kids, it really is geography, right? A lot of our kids draw a 3-hour circle around from home, and that's it. So thinking about maybe like what's going to lead that search for you.
So we're going to have those conversations with your children in April, and then we're going to set them up for school fairs, and here you go. You've been probably to some wonderful school fairs. You've been awed by amazing kids. You probably have a couple horror stories in your back pocket. But thinking about, as admissions officers, what would you expect of a student as far as their preparation, their engagement with that officer? How can we set these guys up to be successful come May?
I mean, I think it's going to carry on to the interview, right? But we're always going to want to answer questions, right? We're going to want to know what that student wants. And so when I think about that, I think in the school fair setting, you can be a little more, 2,000-foot level. But thinking about questions that are maybe not really readily available on the website, right? If you love ice hockey and you want to play ice hockey in college or in high school and college, you probably can find that out beforehand and don't need to walk around the fair asking everyone if they have ice hockey, right? Asking some little more in-depth questions. What do they like about the school they're representing? Things like that.
This is very silly and very small, and I'm about to throw my children under the bus. But when you have your fair and you have so many schools, the one thing I notice is some schools bring amazing swag, right? Everyone knows what swag is. Please go to tables that you're interested in. Don't just go to tables because they have wonderful swag. And if you're going to go to them, then come up with questions. Don't just grab their pen or their cinch bag. I must say, even 8 years ago today, I still have some of those cinch bags we gathered from those fairs. So all I'm saying is if you go to talk to a school and you're like, oh my God, they have these cool squeezy toys, ask questions, give them the time, because everyone has come for this fair from all over the country. So they really are excited to see you. So give them, even if at the end of the day it's not your right match, just give them the good time of day you should.
Westminster does have some excellent string bags, at least they have in the past.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
We're out right now. We're out. Time to reorder.
But one additional thing, and this goes to sort of preparation for the conversations and the interviews. I'll just tell you all a little story. In my previous school, I was in a wonderful conversation with a student. It was going really well, and of course, we want to hear all about the things that they're passionate about. And they started to tell me how much they love swimming and how big a part of their life it was. And that was great for me to hear. It showed real commitment. And then they started to tell me that they're really interested in my school because of our excellent swimming program. But we didn't have a swimming program at my old school or a pool. And so that's just something to be thinking about, to know what you're going into. Spend that extra 15 minutes refreshing yourself before you go to your visits, before you speak to someone at the fair. Have that intentionality. Because this was a great kid, and it was a moment that I think could have been avoided with a little more preparation. So, little tip.
I think the fair can also be a really good time to maybe like explore some schools that you're not sure about, right? Like, let's say you're super familiar with Westminster, you're going to at least come down for an interview and a visit. I want to say hi to you, I want to talk to you, but it might be a great chance to go talk to some of those schools that you're kind of not sure about or maybe you don't know as much about. And so I'd encourage you to take that opportunity.
Yeah, and it's wonderful practice, too. We're building that skill, that rapport, not just the research, but the interactions, and it's part of the reason that you will have such a large school list. People say, really, 30 schools, Jim? Why am I wasting my time? Because you don't know yet what you don't know. And you're becoming a more informed participant in this process. And the next phase in that preparation and learning comes over the summer. We move into summer research and outreach, meaning the child and the family actually trying to engage with the school. This is a time when, as families, you come together to do this work and build a connection with your school. So what would you suggest? We talked a little bit about the online website, but maybe build on that. How do we become smarter over the summer about schools?
Well, I think one thing I know you all know as summer comes is what your schedule is for the following year. So one of the smartest things you could do after you've researched websites, talked to everyone at the fairs, made your list of those things that are important to you, is to start thinking about how you're going to accomplish the visits. And I think that's important because this year, a lot of schools had the same week off. And I know we all work very hard to ensure that you could all visit. So I would think early. It's not always going to happen. You're going to add schools to your list in October or September. But in the summer, it's a good time to start thinking about, over the long weekend in October, what schools am I going to visit? How am I going to get to those schools? And will I need to use Thanksgiving or other times? Can I give you 2 cautionary things not to do? One thing don't do is, in most cases, many of us when we're visiting could probably even do an interview if we needed to. If you can't get to our schools, I recommend for many schools, unless they are very far away, try to do those interviews in person if it all works out, because I think that's really important for you and for the schools, so you get a true understanding. And then 2, when you're talking as a family where you're going to go, this is supposed to be enjoyable. So don't do more than 2 schools a day. There's nothing worse as a mission officer being told how much time we have to finish so I can get to Deerfield, which is 22 minutes from NMH. And that's no one's fault, and I know you're all trying to get in your school visits, but you want them to be meaningful. So that's why starting in the summer, making the calls, going online to set up your appointments will lessen the stress that you will feel as you start to go on these trips.
I mean, Dana mentioned summer visits. I think that those are become more and more popular. I don't think that that's a requirement. If you do want to get out and see some of these places in the spring as you're headed off for the summer or over the summer, we're all open and we're all available. And I think part of this process is it's highly individual, and different families need different things. You may be going through with your 3rd child and you've seen all this. You may be going through with your 1st child and you need to see a little bit more. So I think we're there, and that's not mandatory. But if that would feel good for you to get on those campuses with a little more low-stakes environment when there's no interview, just get a feel for a place, by all means.
Speaking of summer, the kids in the room are going to like this one. Over the next 7 months, our students will spend half of that time on break from Eaglebrook. What guidance do you have for these families who right now are making plans for their children's summer? And again, thinking about the admissions process yet, but also thinking about healthy child development.
Well, I think there are so many good ways to spend your time. And a lot of that's going to depend on your family circumstances, what you have done traditionally as a family in the summers. We love to see kids who are leaning into something that matters the most to them. Sometimes that's family. Sometimes that's taking care of a younger sibling. Sometimes that is, playing on a team and also babysitting or mowing lawns. Sometimes it looks like exploring parts of the world that you're interested in because that's something that you have identified as a talent. What I would make sure to recommend is that everything that you do should fulfill you in a way that when you're away from campus that you can't necessarily find here. And I say that because you all work really hard at Eaglebrook. And we love when you're doing academic enrichment, if that's what you really want to be doing in the summer. You're getting a lot of academics here. We also really want to see how you develop as a human, how you are leading into that time with your family and responsibilities away from this place. So there's no one answer. People often ask this, and I'm a huge believer in traditional summer camp on a lake where you can, go canoeing and learn how to build a fire. Those types of things are also really, really, really important to development of the whole person, which is what I was talking about earlier. How do you engage in the community? So that's a very vague answer with a lot of specific examples, but really it's meant to, your time away from Eaglebrook should be formative for you. It should be meaningful. It should contribute in some way to your family and to however that shows up in your life. So please know that that's important time to spend with your family in all of these ways.
I can be less vague than Dana and maybe on the negative side. And it's easy for me to say this, not having a summer program, but going to the Andover summer program is not going to increase your chances of getting into Andover.
Yeah.
But if there are things that are interesting about their program,
Definitely. Don't do it for the...
yeah.
Yeah.
The
Do it
one
'cause you love it.
and one other thing is we talk a lot about we want to nurture ourselves in the summer, do the things we love. It's always a nice time to think about others. I think one of the things about boarding schools and high school and in life is that we are looking at what are we going to do to make the world a better place. And it might be once a week that you do something. It might be a one-time experience. But I definitely think community service, not everyone can do it. And community service could be exactly what you said, helping your family at home. We understand that we have families from all different backgrounds. And if you weren't home, it would be harder for a parent to go to work, or you're able to help in the afternoons. But again, think about even just a little about how do I give back? It's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Getting a job can be pretty cool also.
We advise our students to build a balance list. Secondary school admission has never been more competitive. How would you give our students, or actually maybe better yet, imagine it's your best friend's kid, what guidance would you give them about a balanced school list?
Well, I think it's important for all the reasons we've talked about already to make sure that every school on your list meets your non-negotiables. And from there, there should be schools that to you feel like aspirational, like it is my dream to go to this school. And there should be schools on there that feel very comfortable, that Mr. Fay has recommended for a variety of reasons. You go to a wonderful school with guidance that most kids in this world do not get. And Mr. Fay knows our schools. He knows this school, and most especially, importantly. And that advice and understanding of the landscape of schools that he has is critical as you think about it. Do not ignore the advice that you're getting from Eaglebrook. It is a long and you know there's experience here that really matters, and everyone here has your best interest in heart. And that's what you need to trust and put your faith in. But definitely go in there and say, these are my dream schools based on research, not based on the fact that I have a friend there or that their team won the New England championship, but really like, these are the schools I want, and then Mr. Fay can help you sculpt beyond that.
I think the only thing I'd add is don't be only brand driven. It's not just getting into your favorite school. It's about getting into school and what you do at that school, right? So if every one of you got into Harvard, that's great that you got into Harvard, but what makes it powerful is what you do when you get there. And so the same holds true in boarding school. There are a lot of wonderful schools out there that you will get to know, that you already know. And so I would say open your mind as you're looking at schools. And also, you're about to have a class of students and the sixth formers who will have decisions. They will pick their schools before you all leave here. And don't go based on only what you hear from other students. Let it be your decision when you're making lists. Let it be your research. You're joining an event online or going to tour in the summer to make that decision if that's a good school for you to be on your list.
And the only other thing that I would add is that when you get to that list of where you're applying, all of those schools should be schools where you would be happy to go to.
So we have to be a compelling candidate if we want to be in contention. And I think that, we can put some big strokes out there, outstanding grades or scores or elite musician or athlete or dancer. I'm wondering if you could think maybe about, and you're in reading season now, and maybe recently, about a candidate who was exceptional for none of those reasons. I think we have a lot of folks who think, okay, I got to be great in some way, but maybe we haven't even opened up our minds to the way that we can be exceptional. You talked about leadership, you talked about service for others. I'm wondering if there's some other stories you could share.
First of all, I don't think every student we accept is going to have a hook or change the face of every program we have. What we're hoping for more than anything is we want really good glue kids. We want students who are going to be willing to participate in the things they do today because they enjoy it, but even most importantly, understand that there are so much out there that you have never done and that you are willing to do, pushing yourself outside your comfort zone to try new things. So as we look at candidates, not every student will be the very best musician or baseball player. It is those students that will come to Northfield Mount Hermon or any boarding school that 10 years after they leave, we all say, what a great kid. What they did in the dorm, the leadership, how they were in the classroom. No one has to say they were the best theater person we've ever had or the very best hockey player. It is about good people, and I think that is something I would think about as you're doing that, and we see a lot of really good people in our process.
Two quick things for me. I think I think about sitting here reading right now. It's a lot of times it's students that we feel like we know really well and really authentically, right? And a lot of times that comes through the interview and through the application as well, right? I think the interview is never going to ruin your chances, but it may be great. It might just be you just hit it off. You had a great conversation that day, and I feel like I really know who that student is and know what they'll bring to our campus. And I think we see a lot of that going through the process. And then I want kids who really want to be at Westminster, right? And I think if you have identified Westminster as a place that you love, you're going to take advantage of all that we have to offer.
On the other side of that, any pitfalls that you would like to throw out there? Naomi, you've been doing a great job with this. I want to say thank you very much. Any pitfalls that you would like to encourage our students to avoid?
Yes. So one of the wonderful things about when we read an application from Eaglebrook is we're going to have a couple in our pools, and we know that the teachers here know students really well. We're looking for themes of engagement and curiosity and kindness and all of the things we've talked about. If you're not showing that on a daily basis, it's not genuine. That comes through. Your teachers here are always going to be complimentary and supportive, but we can tell when we see a line, this person is extremely focused on grades. All right, when we see the converse of that is we see this kid cares about learning. They come and see me about the subjects that we're talking about. They told me about an article they read after class. These are the things that we are searching for. We do not just look at your transcript and put it through AI filters and say yes or no to this kid. We really are looking at the social emotional components of things in addition to that intellectual curiosity and drive. So a pitfall, I think, in my mind, is when you're really results driven. And we can tell that. And that's something right now is the time, if that's sort of how you've come into Eaglebrook, there's nothing wrong with wanting to do well. That is a good thing. You're motivated, you care. But this is a time you're at a place where you have so many opportunities in front of you, dive into those things and don't simply take the path that is going to get you the best grades or the best marks, because that is not what our communities are built on. We could have, a championship swimming team. Back to my swimming example, we have swimming at my school now. But if we don't have kids that are going to root for each other and come and cheer and celebrate successes, it doesn't mean anything. Similarly, we could have an incredible orchestra, and you could be the first violin, or you could be the person that's there supporting and being a part of it all. And so just make sure you're actually genuinely leaning into the things that matter to you and not focused only on what you think we want to see or matters to us in the process.
That really holds true. That's awesome. That really holds true in the interview. We are not looking for anything in particular, and that word authentic, we couldn't use it enough, because what we most want is to get to know you. And we say this because We want to know the person that we are reading about, not the person you think we want to see in an interview. We are not there to trick you. We are not there to ask you the most difficult questions. If you're nervous, I even tell you almost every question I'm going to ask you. But what we want to know is who you are, because we are all together discerning, would this school be a good match or not a good match for you? And that's one of those things you can figure out in an interview. So I definitely would bring your authentic self to everything in the process that you do.
Did any of you guys play the drums? It's over there. It's kind of tempting.
I can play the. I
Yeah.
don't, but I can try.
Okay, everyone stay afterwards.
Miles.
Miles is getting on the kit. All right, let's shift gears a little bit here. Independent schools are expensive. Many of us cannot afford the tuition and are dependent on financial aid. Can you speak to the way in which financial aid is considered and how it may or may not have an impact on admissions?
I think that's, again, it's going to be a little school to school. Typically, by the numbers, we're very fortunate. All of us up here have incredible financial aid budgets, and we'd all like more. We generally run, I think schools in general run somewhere around, around the 50-50 ratio of students applying for financial aid versus not applying for financial aid. Most schools do not have 50% of their students on financial aid. So it tends to be the most competitive pool, but the gap isn't huge. And so I think you need to be pretty intentional with your search, if that's part of it, of making sure that you're applying to appropriate schools, that you've got maybe a little bit of a wider list, if that's an important process. The other thing I would say is it's a great opportunity to kind of expand beyond the norm, but beyond the norm of, hey, 10, 12 schools that like everyone's looking at here at Eaglebrook. If you expand beyond that, where maybe there's only 1 or 2 students from Eaglebrook those schools might be even more excited to have that in their applicant pool.
Every school is a little different in how they do their financial aid, and it'll be important for you to ask. There are some schools that are completely need blind, there's some that are need sensitive, there's some that take it into account. Those are questions that I would ask, not the first thing. First of all, find out if it's a good match. I think everyone can ask questions about financial aid, and to be very clear, we are all understanding. We work in education. So when you ask us about aid, this is not far from things that we ourselves as human beings think about. But I would first start with asking questions and talking about the school. Do a little research about financial aid online, because some schools are very clear how they do. There are some schools that will gap you. Some schools will not. So just ask the questions, but most importantly, don't only base on whose aid and who gives the most aid out, because you never know how the process is going to come. You never know your best match. So keep an open mind. Admission officers are very happy to help you. Financial aid offices are very happy to help you. The only thing I tell you is the way you follow deadlines for admissions, follow those deadlines for financial aid. Because we are kind, we want the process finished for you.
So you are all here because you are in charge, more or less, of this admissions process at your school. It tends to be a pretty small group of people. We're kind of wondering, what happens behind the curtain a little bit. But I'm curious if you would like to share for us some of those most common myths and rumors that you've heard about the admissions process that you would like to just take a moment and dispel for us.
I think that there's this desire, this idea that there's like this key, this thing. And I think you've probably heard us dispel that already tonight, but there is no, if you do X, you will get into Y, right? That no school is there one thing that you can do to guarantee that you'll get into.
This is a simple, silly one, but one of the biggest rumors about this process is that we're trying to stress you out at every angle, that this is supposed to be really hard. We need you to come visit our schools. I have to tell you, I think the admission process, and I was in it 4 times with my own children, has been one of the most empowering parts of being a parent. It has been so fascinating from going to Eaglebrook to high school to NMH to college to figure out how much my children have grown and to hear what other admission officers say about my children. So the rumor is that it should be stressful. What it should be is empowering as a parent, because it'll be a privilege for you to go on these visits with your children to see what Eaglebrook and what they have done for themselves and how they communicate and how they talk to admission officers. It isn't very impressive.
One rumor I know that I'd love to dispel at any chance, so thank you for this, is that all of our schools talk to each other and talk about the kids who are applying and say, who's going to take who. That does not happen. It's illegal. I promise you it doesn't happen. We barely talk to each other. It's amazing we're all here right now, and I'm so excited to see my two friends on stage because we are in the zone reading files, and we're just thinking about what's right for our school. So please know that every candidate is read by every school, and it's a little bit of a vacuum in that moment as we think about our individual. We're very collaborative and collegial, but in that moment, we're locked in on you all.
That's awesome. Thank you. All of these folks are going to start engaging with your schools, the kids, and the parents. Parents, I think this might be especially helpful for you here. Any words of wisdom that you would like to offer to the kids, yes, but to the parents in the room, maybe in particular, as they're trying to figure out how much, what ways, who's saying what is driving the communication to schools?
I've got two things. So this has to do with the school visit. When you visit a school, you're going to go on tour. Some schools have 2 tour guides and separate the kids and parents, and that is awesome if they can do that. Many schools, you're going to go in a group. Letting your child engage with the tour guide a couple steps ahead of you is a good thing. It's not to say you can't ask questions, you can't talk to them. You totally can. They want to talk to you too. But let the kid lead. Let the kid kind of make that initial connection before you come in with your questions. It can be a little awkward at first as you're settling in and getting to know the guide. But please center your child in that moment. And then after the visit, when you get back in the car, to come back to Eaglebrook or wherever you're headed next, give them a moment to process. Don't immediately, what'd you think? Because I think it takes a minute to really kind of feel what you're experiencing. And sometimes they're not going to be able to talk about it right away. It's a good idea to write down some notes if you're in the middle of a 10 school week visits. It's good to sort of be able to differentiate. But parents, let the kids kind of come out with things in their own time. And this is really, what Naomi said is important. This should be a fun process. It's the first time where kids, in many cases, have had real agency in a decision in their lives, and allowing them to have that and to own that and to be a big part of it is critical. And so the way that you interact on these things, you're going to spend more time together during your visit week than you probably have in a long time, and that's a gift. So lean into it, have fun with it. Yeah.
Mr. K, who is your old placement person, always would say this: bring an extra outfit. Life happens. You need to eat. Yes. Something's going to happen. Something's going to spill on a tie. So this is less of a just do it. So as a parent, I had to run to an outlet to buy ties for my children. Don't let that happen to you. So that's just a little thing I'm sharing.
There's another school that always says, don't drink the hot chocolate. We're going to offer you hot chocolate. Don't drink the hot chocolate. You're not going to know what to do with it. It's hot. We're immediately going to take you up some stairs and into a room with a white couch. We're sorry. We're going to offer it to you. Don't drink the hot chocolate. Stick with the water. Hot chocolate afterwards if you want.
The reward after the interview.
Yeah, exactly. Couple of quick things. I mean, so we've talked about this agency and this. I think one of the things that we love about this is that we're at this critical juncture, right? We're getting to work with students who are kind of taking this first agency, right? I have a daughter. She's in 6th grade. We're looking for schools for next year. She does not have a lot of agency. She would like some. She doesn't have any. You are at this point, parents, that's it's really neat because you're seeing this and you're seeing them want this. I think the flip side of that, and we've talked about some of these non-negotiables, is I do think that this is still a process that parents, for the most part, should be involved in. It shouldn't be a kind of 100% student decision and parents just saying whatever they want. You are you're mature, you have some wisdom, you might see, okay, this might be a great school for them for 1 year, but we're looking, you as parents are able to see kind of that long game, that 4 years. With that said, I would say, I would recommend to have the hard conversation early if you need to have a hard conversation. My easiest example for this is you live here in Deerfield, Massachusetts, and you are unwilling to have your child go to school in California. Don't let them look at schools in California. Have that conversation now, right? California schools are great. I think you should all look at them. But if there's those things for a parent that like, they might like this and we're just not willing to compromise on it, get it out of the way now, because once that acceptance comes in March, it's going to be a lot harder to try to convince them not to go to California.
Do you find in this early process that sometimes, the voice of the candidate, parents sometimes usurping that role that you want the child to have? I'm just wondering if there's a balance, if you expect that, is it normal, or who do you really want to be hearing from when it comes to building that relationship with your school?
Well, we'd love to hear from the student in that way. We want to hear from you what you loved about the campus and the experience, not necessarily your parents. Maybe your parents also, because they may have a slightly different perspective on it. But to Miles's point, it's such a good one. This is really a family decision and a family conversation. While I mentioned letting your kid lead, that's an important part of it because they do know a little bit about where they want to go, but you're there as well, putting these kind of guardrails up. And I think that the process itself should feel like you're getting closer and you're understanding each other even more. And the admissions folks, we're here to try to help you do that. So we do want to hear from you in the process. Not every 2 days, not even every week, but we love to hear engagement and what you've been up to. And so I encourage that. But it really should be coming from the kid because that's who we're going to be continuing that connection with when they're on our campuses.
Thank you. So just a little time update. It's 5:50. I have one more scripted question, and then we're going to have an opportunity for about 5-6 minutes, roughly, of audience questions. Jennifer, we do have a microphone in that bag over there if you were willing to do that. We do have the Evening of the Arts that is coming up, so we do have a hard stop at 6 p.m., and at that point, we are going to start turning this space over for the musical and theatrical presentations this evening.
When do I get to play the drums?
You are the transition, actually, Miles. Yeah, so this is when he starts hitting things, you get out of the room. That's how that works. Last question from me. SSATs. What is the role? What is the value? You each have, as schools, perhaps different perspectives and requirements, but if we could generalize it or speak from your own office, how do you see the SSAT, and perhaps along with that, how big of a role is SSAT prep, would you say, for our children?
I can start quickly. I think it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not required at Westminster, so if you submitted it, we're going to look at it. It's a piece of the puzzle. I think what we're looking for is themes, right? And so the SSAT scores hopefully will reinforce what your transcript is already telling us.
The one thing to remember is the SSATs are 3 hours on a Saturday morning. And you could have a good Saturday morning, you could have a bad Saturday morning, but they are only one part of the exam. They're only one part of the process. So remember that. Also, the one thing to think about is you have to be careful. As we've left COVID, more and more schools are bringing back the SSAT. So be very careful to look at what is expected. And you're welcome to ask any school what they and how they use it. One thing about it is the SSATs or ISE or whatever test you take is the one thing that all students do. So everyone here goes to the same school, takes the same classes, but we have students applying from hundreds of schools around the world. And it is the one consistent piece. It is by no means the only piece or the one that's going to be a deal breaker for admissions, but it is just one piece of the puzzle. So remember that as you're deciding what you need to do to prepare for it and how many times you take it, and ask schools if you really want to know more about how they use it.
We are one of the schools that did go back to requiring the SSAT just this year. And what we learned in 4 years of being test optional was a lot about how we can understand test scores and how they help us understand how students are prepared for our school and how they might translate. We know that there's a story behind the score for every kid, and we focus on that. We have not just plopped testing back into our evaluation rubric where it was before. We've learned so much, and so we are really looking at it, as Miles said, as a piece of that. In terms of test prep, to your question, Jim, we're a school that requires testing, and I do not recommend spending a lot of time on test prep. The needle that it moves is fairly marginal. It's not something that you should dedicate your time to. You should take practice tests, which you will do here, so that you know what it's going to feel like when you're in the testing room. You know what the flow of the test will be. But I can't underscore enough that spending summer doing something in service to others, something that fuels a passion for you, spending your free time doing that is going to light up more bells in our admissions process than a score that is maybe 5 or 10% higher than it was before.
Thank you. I'm hoping we'll get through about 3 or 4 questions from the audience, if those exist. If you have a question that you would like to ask our panel members, just please go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll come to you with a microphone. I might hop over this way here. I'll be right back.
Y'all actually answered all my questions, but I really just want to thank you. This was so illuminating and has assuaged a lot of anxiety to where we are looking forward to the fun. Did not think it could be that. Thank y'all so much.
Yeah.
Yes, am I okay? Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, my question is about the interview. How much percentage do you think importance is for the interview if you evaluate the whole application? Considering the order, like I think you interview the student first before you will be able to review their whole application, like recommendation letter, transcript, right? So for example, if a student screw up the interview about the first impression, then do you think like how much you will percentage you will evaluate for the whole application? Thank you.
So if you think of an application like a story, it is one part of the story. And the idea of an interview is it actually gets us to know you, but also learn more about you than just what we see on the application. But like the testing, people have good and bad days. And we're going to look at the whole application. We are going to hear from people who know you far better than we do. We will have met you for a half an hour to 45 minutes, where you are going to have teachers who might have taught you for 3-4 years who definitely know you much better. So think of it as a part of the puzzle. It is one of the things that we look at, but there's not a certain percentage. It's one of the parts of the story that we look at to discern if we are the right match for you. And sometimes, to be really clear, we're human. And it could be us that have caused. We could be the one who's not connecting with your child, not you not connecting. So every once in a while, we might have a bad day, one every 10 years. But if we do, remember, it is a group effort in an interview.
Yeah, only thing that I would add is, coming from this place, how you are doing here is so much more important than every other piece of the puzzle. All of us know this place so well. How you are doing here is like just dramatically more important than everything else. And the only way you can really screw up an interview, in my opinion, is to say something really bad about our school or about someone else. It's happened.
Hi, I'm a parent of an international student. I guess it varies per schools, but do you have a quota for number of students per nation, per countries, different countries?
So we do not have a quota. We rely heavily on an evaluation rubric that's consistent for all students as we make our admissions decisions with a committee of 10 people that are involved in all of the decisions. And the question of quota is such an important one. I understand that is a word that is thrown around a lot. As a school, we want to build a community that's representative of our world. Here in the United States, we are an American boarding school, but we want to build a community that is representative of our world. And that's going to look different every year based on the applicant pool. So we're looking for the strength of the applicant pool. We cannot build a community representative of our world if there are 30% of our students from one country, but we are not thinking about it as a quota at any way, if that helps. We are thinking about it really holistically when we think about the goals of our community for our students.
We're also very clear at boarding school that we are creating global citizens, and that on our level, high school, you access diversity. Diversity in so many ways, from racial, religious, socioeconomical, as well as international. So those are things we value very strongly because we know it is far easier to access diversity in high school than it is once you get to university, no matter how diverse they are. So as we are considering, that is a value that we place on the student body in ensuring that we have as diverse a possible boarding school as we can. So we value everything and then try to find the best matches amongst those students.
We've got one more.
Question is about food. If, I know my kid sometimes struggles with type of food that the schools serve. How do they go about knowing which foods are offered at the schools?
Yeah, I think you'll see the dining hall. Food's one of the most important things we do, right? I think you'll see the dining hall when you're on your visit. Most of us, I think, schedules kind of depend a little bit, but if there's a chance, to be in there while a meal is going on, you get to see what it looks like. Talk to the kids. The tour guides will tell you. They will be completely honest about that. They're probably going to be a little, because they eat the food every day, they're probably going to talk a little more negatively about it than it actually is. And then, even like, listen, we are all, we're all an open book, and it may not be on your first visit, but as if you're coming back to admitted student days and things like that, like I've seen multiple families having conversations with our director of dining services to talk about what they offer. And the range has grown dramatically over the last, when I went to school, you had a turkey sandwich, you had the hot meal, those were the options, that was it.
I think it's a beautiful segue because we would like to invite all of you to dinner. It's going to be Thanksgiving up there in the dining hall, and that's pretty much, you'll see, that's a normal meal that we're serving you guys tonight. Absolutely typical Friday night that you'll have up there. I'd like to take a moment and say thank you to our guests. Thank you very much for your efforts to be here.